Welcome back to Tech Beyond Gender. I'm your host, Meena Satishkumar. Today we have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Shirley McIntyre. Shirley is a General Manager of Architecture and Technology Strategy at Bank of New Zealand. She has over 30 years of experience in the tech sector. She has created and led the digital strategy in several major organizations in New Zealand and has held several senior roles in MBIE, Kiwibank, ANZ, amongst others. I have the privilege of working in her team now, but I know very little about her journey and experience in tech. So I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Shirley. Thank you for joining us today. And I know finding a space in your calendar is a challenge, but thank you so much for making time for this.
Thanks so much, Meena. Thank you.
Can we start the conversation by you sharing a little bit about your journey into the tech industry? What ignited your passion for this field?
I actually, early in my career when I first started in the workforce, I was actually on the banking side, not in technology at all. And I actually stumbled across it, surprisingly. So I'm not classically educated. I didn't go to university. I was a school leaver working in banking. But I accidentally discovered that I was a systems thinker. And that led me down my career path, really. I sort of understood quite quickly things about technology that other people didn't and found magical or opaque or hard to understand. I tended to gravitate towards and found exciting and interesting, and my ability to learn just seemed to be ignited by my curiosity, I think. So one, I just kind of almost self-discovered that I was a systems thinker, and then concepts that other people found really difficult, I found really easy to understand. And then I sort of self-educated a lot. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of research. And when I first started in my career, a lot of that research wasn't available via Google. You actually had to purchase books and do a lot of reading, and that's exactly what I did.
Did you start off in a technical role, Shirley?
No, I didn't at all. No, I actually started in a junior entry-level role in BNZ credit cards, actually, way back in the day. So I haven't been at BNZ all that time. I've done a lot of other things in between. But yeah, my first role was in a credit cards area, in a very operational role. And then I sort of grew my career. I must have been ambitious and driven. At the time, way back then, women weren't known as being overly ambitious and driven, but that's definitely what I must have been, because I was always agitating for new roles and new experiences. And then after a stint, I ended up on a service desk. And that service desk was doing a lot of different technical things. So there was new things being rolled out to branch network and also old legacy technology in the branch network. And we had to know about all of it. But we had to do a lot of self-learning. And so that was my first experience in a specifically technical role, and then from there I went into business analysis, project management, test management, QA, quality assurance planning, and then program management, and then into consulting and architecture, and that was my journey. That was my kind of career path.
Wow. So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced early in your career, and how did you overcome them?
One of the challenges was not being taken seriously, and there's a whole pile of reasons for that, which have to do with probably, gender bias. The industry was largely male dominated. A lot of women weren't in technical roles, so there was a lot of probably underlying and implied bias, around whether or not you could take certain challenges on. And so you had to probably, well, in my experience, you had to really, really prove yourself over and over again. So that's definitely one of the challenges, and probably also the challenge of your own imposter syndrome. Because I didn't go through university and I haven't been kind of classically educated, I'm probably very aware of that as a weakness, and it's probably only been in recent parts of my career where I'm sort of really confident that I know. I kind of know what I'm doing, and I've done this for long enough that I feel that I've still got that curiosity, and I've still got that ability to learn, and I still do a lot of research myself. Admittedly, I'm a little bit time poor at times, but so I probably have overcome that to a degree, but I probably still have that in my mind.
Wow. Imposter syndrome, and Shirley, I can't believe that.
I think we all have it to a degree, don't we? Are we good enough? And it probably, in some respects, pays dividends, because we're always trying to stretch ourselves and prove ourselves to ourselves. So,
But I also feel that it could lead into burnouts easily, right? You're just sort of constantly working hard, and you always need to stand out. You feel the need to stand out to be able to recognize or even gain acceptance in a team.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's very true. And I can tell you, that was another challenge, is quite early on in my career when I was on technology leadership teams, I was very frequently the only female in the room. So, there is a dynamic that comes with that. And, for various reasons, my husband and I separated when my son was quite young. And so I was raising my son on my own. So a single woman on leadership teams with, a child at home, and quite often, my peers had other support networks around them where they didn't have those same challenges that I had, just even around the boundaries of availability. I would still work really long hours, but I still had all the school pickups and, after school events to kind of take care of as well. So juggling those dynamics was sometimes really, really challenging early on in my career. He's well grown now, so I don't have those challenges anymore. But that in early days of my career, that was really hard. How do you prioritize all of those things?
Can you share a pivotal moment in your career which significantly impacted your professional trajectory?
Yeah, I think one early career moment was I had returned from maternity leave with my son, and I worked on a major program at a bank. And that major program, I was doing a lot of test leadership, test program management, and leading a particular program of work. But I felt like I'd proven myself, I'd delivered it, I'd done a good job with it, and I really wanted to move on to newer things. Mm-hmm. And so I had a conversation with the CIO at the time, and said, look, I'd really, really like to do something a little bit different and move beyond focusing on quality assurance and testing. Is there anything that you think that I could, turn my attention to? And he had to think about it and came back to me and said, look, there's a piece of work that no one seems to be taking on, but it's a group-wide initiative, and I think, you definitely could step into it. And that piece of work ended up being a global program around internet banking, email management, content management, and it was big in scope, really meaty, but also early on in in the cycle of internet banking capabilities. So that gave me an opportunity to really accelerate my understanding at the forefront of a new technology trend that a lot of people hadn't been exposed to. And I think just asking for that opportunity and taking it on. Admittedly, I didn't know what I was getting myself into because I really didn't know what I didn't know at that point. But I think just grasping that opportunity and really leaning hard into it so that I could deliver and prove myself to everybody did change the trajectory of my career. And I think it did a whole pile of things for my own confidence as well, that, you know, that whole ability to learn at speed, keeping up that curiosity, focusing on what the business needed, and developing relationships with people outside of pure technology relationships, because up until that point, the work that I had been doing had been very internally focused within technology. Whereas now the new area that I was involved in gave me an opportunity to get really big exposure to the wider business and what it needed. So it gave me a whole pile of new skills that I hadn't had to develop to that point.
So what was your role in that specific project, Shirley?
Yeah, so I was the leader of the whole program. So I was the program manager of delivering a series of really major initiatives across a wide variety of internet capabilities that, you know, the bank was exploring. And it had global links as well. So, you know, I was involved with organisations in other countries, not just Australia and New Zealand, but in the UK and the US. So it gave me a big exposure, and I was leading the team and developing the team.
Nice. That too in digital strategy in the early days, I can imagine underrepresentation of women would have been very generous.
Definitely, yeah. It was, but I didn't feel any gender I definitely didn't feel anything in that moment and with that group of people. Maybe it was just the way it was working out, but yeah, that wasn't a moment where I felt at all like, oh wow, I'm a female leader in technology. Maybe it was just purely because of the type of people involved, but everyone was very, very we were all learning, I think. Maybe that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any other roles as a leader in technology or even as an architect in technology where you felt there was some form of gender bias?
Yes, since moving into the architecture space, because I did kind of after that moment where I took on that big program, I developed a good understanding of, you know, digital technologies, and that's what led me into the consulting kind of path and then eventually into the architecture path. And ever since I've been involved in architecture, it's very much been a male-dominated area, and there's been very few leaders in architecture that have been female, and so I've always felt quite rare in that regard. But as you know, we've been growing our architecture practice. We've been trying to make sure that we're taking on some amazing talented people such as yourselves. So it has always been very male dominated, and I've always felt that. You know, there's the gender diversity, the brain diversity, the different style of thinking that comes from women leaders in technology that I think would be very valuable to have more of in the architecture and engineering spaces. And I find it surprising that more women aren't attracted to this area, because we do typically see in technology, a lot of women gravitate towards the product manager, and project manager and sort of like organising type fields rather than the technical and engineering and architectural type fields. And yet I think we really would benefit from more females in the architecture space. So yeah, I've definitely felt it, and I've felt the uniqueness of it. But I do find that architects in general are very open to working with all genders, like they're it's a very level playing field when you do collaborate with architects. They're not at all concerned with the fact that you're a female.
Yeah, as you know, I was involved in a piece of research last year, and when we published the results and when we interviewed some of the women working in technology sector, it was interesting to find how a lot of the women started off in technical roles and then slowly gravitated towards delivery manager or product management sort of roles. And they were saying like how they were guided by their people managers or other mentors to actually move into those roles. And I was doing some literature reviews as well on why this could possibly be happening. And the most common reason that was cited was how we don't really have mentors, right? We don't see people like ourselves as many solution architects or tech leads or engineering leads or enterprise architects for that matter. So you don't see many people like yourself in those roles, but you see many people like ourselves in product management or delivery management roles. So by default, we sort of start to think, okay, probably that's the path that I take. Right, and especially in infrastructure or when it comes to technology, security or network, we don't really see many women in those sectors.
Yeah, so if you can't see it, you can't be it, is that phrase, right? Yeah.
We tend to actually strike a great balance with the gender, but then what happens after a few years? It's a very interesting journey. I think this is where we probably need to sort of come up with some clear career guidelines or pathways saying, okay, these are the options that you have if you want to move on to technical roles, or these are the non-technical pathways, career pathways. And this is probably quite lacking, I feel, in many organizations. Well, some of the organizations, the people managers, they don't really have clear visibility or understanding about the different pathways an individual can take. So they don't know what they don't know, so they can't really guide them. We probably need to put a system in place where within the organizations where anyone in technical roles as they get in can actually see that even though they don't see people like themselves, whereas there should be some sort of nudge saying, hey, you don't see people like yourself in the security team or network team, but guess what? There are opportunities which you can go and explore.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think you're right. I think, technology is such a big field now that, there's so much specialization that a lot of people don't understand, what a particular role entails and what it means and what it does. And certainly, I think, quite often in the architecture and technology strategy space, there's so few people that do it that a lot of people don't get the exposure to it, whereas a product manager and platform manager type roles and engineer type roles are way more commonplace, so it's much easier for people to understand what they do. So it is often hard to understand what that role looks like, and then once you get into that area, you realise how big and vast it is and how much you need to kind of know that's very different to what you would do in an engineering role.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, having been in this sector for last 30 years, you would have seen changes in the sector as well, right, with regards to gender equity and stuff. Do you think there are still challenges that women face in the tech industry? And how do you think they can be addressed?
I do think there are challenges because there's a number of different things. There's probably almost a inherent bias that we all have around some of the challenges that females face. You know, we do still take on, there's a lot of statistics around this. We still take on the lion's share of the mental load of, our home life, our, all of the challenges that we've got with running households, whether we've got children or not. We still take on a lot of that, unacknowledged workload. And then we also have, quite a lot of things that we've just talked about. People tend to direct them into certain types of roles. And so if you were attracted to other roles, that's still a path not frequently trodden. And so, even the support network may not necessarily be around you. So there's those challenges. So I do still see that. But I think it's very, very different to when I first started in technology. It's very much more democratized, and there's so much more resources available to support people, and organizations have generally got good flexible processes in place, that kind of thing. So I think that has come a long, long way in time, but there's still barriers to break down, and there's also still style differences between men and women, just naturally because of who we are, and some of those style differences create barriers, for people, purely because, as female leaders, we tend to use more emotional language in a positive way. We're way more empathetic, and there's all those kind of things that doesn't mean that men are not empathetic. I'm just saying that there's those kind of style differences that we often have, and sometimes that means that people take us less seriously. So those challenges exist as well. And I do feel that sometimes we have to have so much more knowledge to prove ourselves. Maybe I'm coming back to imposter syndrome. So those things exist, and until we start having way more transparency in organisations and way more kind of like values-based approach to how we work with others, those challenges continue to exist.
Mm-hmm. When you reminded me of an article which I read recently about how a female leader, when they display assertiveness, can be seen as being aggressive. Have you had such experiences yourself?
I have. I probably am a person who struggles to be assertive. But I certainly can be, but I definitely know that is true. That is a bias that comes across, and I think that's challenging because there's all of those things that happen where if a female is assertive, it gets perceived in a certain light, and yet in order to do what we do have to take a stand on certain things. And so it is quite taxing to think about how you're going to influence people to get something across the line without coming across as being overly assertive or aggressive. And I do think that is a struggle and continues to be a struggle. I definitely struggle with that. And then what you've got to think about is, does being right matter? And, I'm in the kind of role where you sometimes do have to be right. So that's an internal dialogue you happen quite often, because you're sort of thinking, well, what is the best way to get this argument across the line, but to take people with you and to influence their thinking in the right way, without being overly assertive. So that's one of those influencing skills, techniques that you sort of have to learn. And sometimes if you're tired or, you've been doing too much context switching, you're not as thoughtful as you should be about those things.
Well, it's quite challenging, right? The same assertiveness from a man can be seen as being a great leader. So you might have a similar problem or a situation at work where you just don't have to you're not thinking just about the outcome you want, but you're also thinking about how you will be perceived as a woman, and you need to think about the behavioral aspect as well, right? It's just, it's an art.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, as we all know, interpersonal interactions are sometimes the hardest challenges you'll face in your workplace. Doesn't matter what your role is, because different dynamics and different people have different reactions to the arguments that you put in front of them. So you're constantly working on that. That's something you've constantly got to be thinking about, is whether or not you're presenting the argument in the right way that will influence that person to head in the same direction as you. So I think this is the strength of the change that's happened in the industry, I think, over the last 10 to 15 years, with the introduction of, the lean agile mindset, and working transparency, co-creating with others, is that what we've been able to do is change the way we influence others through those kinds of techniques. I really love the fact that co-creation and working collaboratively, that whole style, even with the tooling we now have available to us, has changed the dynamic of how you influence others. Whereas in prior decades, I suppose it was way more hierarchical. So, who was the highest paid person in the room had the strongest argument. So I do think that has shifted a little bit of that dynamic, because, I do think that women are very good collaborators. Typically, we do collaborate well with others.
Now, as a leader in tech, what are some of the core values and principles that guide your management style?
From a core values perspective, I'm a big believer in transparency. I really think it's important for my leaders to have as much information as I can give them on where the organisation needs to go, and to make sure that they know, where my focus is, what I'm thinking about. So transparency is a really important value for me. Another big value for me is this curiosity and continuous learning. Like, I really love the idea of that constant evolution of our knowledge. So that's a big value. If I'm not sort of being nourished with knowledge, then how can we really take the team forward and, continue to evolve our thinking? So that's a big one. And then the other core value is to always be adding value. So, I always think about, have I added value to the organisation? Have I made an impact? And have I moved it forward from where I found it? So that continuous evolution, continuous learning, continuous improvement mindset is really important. And then respect for everyone, we have to show people respect, and respect what they bring to the table. Because I always think everyone comes to work motivated to do their best work. And so if we start from that principle, if we think that everybody wants to do well, then we can have a dialogue that's really respectful of what they're bringing to the table. Those are the things that matter to me.
Great. Because you spoke a lot about constant learning and finding out the curiosity, right? I'm so tempted to ask you this question about what are the emerging trends in tech that you are paying attention to?
Yeah, I think, there's two big ones. Quantum, I think, is going to be a game changer. And then also AI, everyone's talking about AI. Obviously, it's on a big hype cycle, but it is also an extremely fast moving trend. It's enormous. The field is vast. There's we're sort of seeing the emergence of specialist models, an agent-based kind of approach to AI. There's so much tooling available now. What it's going to do for the industry is absolutely phenomenal. And I think, that can sometimes incite fear, what about our jobs, what's happening in technology. But, a quote that's really stuck with me is that humans with AI are going to outperform humans without AI. And that's really stuck with me. So I see what we have to do here is we have to continuously learn, because as I said, it's changing so fast. There's so much happening in that space, and it is going to change how we all do our jobs in technology, I think, supported by AI. And so and there's also that other risk element around responsible AI and ethics and where that's going. So that's another field that's, popping up and emerging out of that, which is really challenging philosophically how organisations approach the use of AI. And I think that is an enormous field in itself. So those are probably the big areas. Everything else is, as we know, very pattern-based inside technology, very much about renewal and legacy renewal, and a lot of organisations are burdened by legacy, but I think, that's another field that AI is going to help us really accelerate our way through, whereas previously we just didn't have that tooling available to us, and so it was very, very labour intensive to remediate legacy modernisation. Yeah.
Great. Now, what advice would you give to young women aspiring to enter the tech field?
I would really advise a lot of women joining technology to never be afraid, and always keep an open mind and keep curious about the roles around you. Like one career limiting move would be to stick in a certain path or trajectory that you're on track with, whereas there are a lot of other roles in technology that a lot of people don't get exposed to. And so, talk to people, form good networks, build relationships with other people, and get curious about what it is that they're doing.
Now, how do you form these networks?
That's a really good question, because I probably don't see myself as a great networker. But I think it's really about, building relationships and rapport with other people, and just talking to people and finding out more. But also, delivery and doing great work, which you always do with other people, is a great vehicle for that, for networking, because, probably my form of networking has always been in the projects that I've delivered, in the people that I've worked with along the way, and building trust through delivery. Execution means that people will come back and talk to you again and again, because, they value what you bring to the table.
Wow. Have you, I know you've been a single mom as well, with that family commitment and work commitment, have you actually made time to go out for meetups, went out actively looking for networks within the industry and stuff? or was it mainly through work you established your contacts and your networking has always been through work?
Yeah, my networking's largely always been through work and the projects that I've delivered. Some of my best and strongest relationships in the industry are with people that I've worked alongside with, people that I, didn't know and then delivered major projects with, and then they've formed, very strong bonds and relationships together. So that's really how that's happened. Yes, I've attended networks, and yes, I've attended industry events, but my strongest relationships are with people that I've worked alongside. Yeah.
Cool. You mentioned to us some time back that the landscape for women in tech has changed over the years. What do you think needs to be improved more in the upcoming years?
I think, one of the things that we need to work on is this pulling in of, young developing talent into a diverse set of roles, rather than where we tend to see women gravitating to the project management, product management track. Because I do think that there is more diversity needed in the engineering and architecture and more technical roles. I think their input would be valuable, and I think that diversity of thinking is really what's needed to strengthen up the architecture and engineering space. I think there is a difference in how women and men operate and think, and I think we can only benefit from having better diversity in that space.
How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance, especially given the demanding nature?
Yeah, sorry, Meena. I was laughing because I think some people would observe that I probably don't observe a healthy work-life balance. I think I've definitely been better in recent years, but I would say that I have a tendency to get a little bit work obsessed. But I guess it all depends on how you frame work-life balance, because in my mind, I like to solve difficult problems, and I find that hard to put those difficult problems down with an hourly construct around it. So I like to continue to solve problems when I can, and sometimes you need deep work time to do that, and it's sometimes difficult to do deep work in your 9 to 5, slots. So I think one of the things that I do like to do, though, to focus on the work-life balance is when you are having time away from work, is to have great adventures and to spend time with great people who inspire you. So that's probably my focus, is when I am away from work, and I'm spending time with friends and family, is it on something that really, fills you up and nourishes you and makes you feel great about, the world and, things outside of the workplace.
Do you have any personal habits or routines, do you think, which have contributed to your success in your career?
I think I do a lot of personal research and reading that has helped me think about things differently. I'm always open to not always being right, and being curious and questioning people. If I think something, like, am I correct in my thinking, or can you help me see this from a different perspective? So I think that habit of, and obviously, anybody gets upset with feedback that's negative, but at the same stage being open to that and processing that and thinking it through keeps you on that open mindset. Yeah, I think that's a big thing that you need to always do, is come from a frame of reference that you're not always right, and so you're thinking, sometimes you've got to unlearn things, I do think that one of the recent, recent, I'm talking about 7 years or so, but where you had to unlearn a whole pile of work habits in order to relearn how to work differently with other people in terms of co-creation and agile methods and all that kind of thing. So there's a whole pile of different thinking that you had to unlearn and then learn new. And I think that's one of the key habits that people need to keep top of mind.
What are your thoughts on the future of women in tech? Where do you see the industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
My hope for women in tech is that we don't have to talk about it anymore, because we're just such a big part of the industry that it's completely acceptable that we are in, what people would call non-traditional roles. That's my desire, is that it's not even a conversation.
Nice. Looking back, what would you say to your younger self just starting out in tech?
I would say be more confident. You definitely have the skills and you definitely have the ability to take this on, and be less tentative.
And how do you define success? What are you most proud of in your career so far?
One of the big things I hope that I've done is inspire others to grow their careers and to take on challenges that they may not have otherwise taken on, because I've given them confidence in their abilities. I think that would be probably what I'm most proud of, is seeing others grow. And I'm definitely proud of some of the work. Certain deliveries, stand out in my mind. Because I think for technology people, the big buzz is actually, delivering. And that's always an enormous undertaking, and it's something that you're really proud of because it gives you legacy. So those are things that I'm really proud of. Seeing absolute transformation in certain organisations that I've worked for because of the work that we've done and the groundwork that we've done around where to go and direction setting, that's definitely enormous. That's a huge buzz. But, delivery, you can't beat delivery. That's awesome.
So nice to talk to you, Shirley. It was a great honor and privilege to listen to your story and share your perspectives. Is there anything else you would like to say before we close off?
No, just thank you so much. What an amazing opportunity. So thank you, Meena. I've really enjoyed it. It's great.